Israeli tanks were seen massing near the border with Lebanon on Monday as Israeli jets continued striking targets, this time inside the Lebanese capital. All signs that both Israel and Hezbollah are marching closer toward an all-out war.
إذا قرر الإسرائيلي أن يدخل بريا
Hezbollah's deputy leader on Monday said the Iranian-backed militia was ready if Israel launched a ground invasion.
للالتحام البري.
Naim Qassem delivered his first public address since an Israeli airstrike on a Beirut suburb last Friday killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah.
أمينا عاما للحزب في أقرب فرصة.
Qassem said the group would choose a new leader shortly. Lebanese civilians watched the developments with trepidation. Lebanon's health ministry said more than 1,000 Lebanese have been killed and at least 6,000 wounded in the past 2 weeks. The government said 1 million people, around a fifth of the population, have fled their homes. Some who fled southern Lebanon slept in a parking lot in the city of Sidon. Ghada Fawaz in the mountain village of Aramoun opened up apartments to the displaced, and she told Reuters she sees their fear.
Every day when I pass by and knock on their door to check up on them and see what they need, I feel the fear and anxiety in their eyes. They're always afraid, God forbid, to get hurt where they fled to. This is because of what they went through and what they witnessed.
The desperation for some is compounded because until now, Lebanon was their refuge. Raed Ali is among the thousands of refugees from the civil war in neighboring Syria. He said he fled Syria for the Beirut suburb of Dahiyeh and fled again to Beirut. He told Reuters, quote, "I have a family, 5 daughters, and my brother's family, and we don't know where to go. That is the problem. We don't know what our fate is." Israeli forces have dealt multiple blows to Hezbollah in a 2-week wave of attacks on targets in Lebanon that has eliminated several commanders. Hezbollah and Israel have been trading fire across the border since the start of the war in Gaza, which was triggered by the October 7th attack by Hamas militants. Israel rapidly ramped up its attacks on Hezbollah 2 weeks ago, killing much of the group's leadership. Its stated goal is to make its northern areas safe for residents to return to their homes. Israel's defense minister is now discussing widening the offensive.
The death toll from Hurricane Helene surpassed 100 on Monday, days after the storm tore through the southeastern United States. And the White House said the number of storm-related deaths could go much higher. Here's U.S. Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood Randall.
The current data we have is that it looks like there could be as many as 600 lost lives. But we don't have any confirmation of that. We know there are 600 who are either lost or unaccounted for.
In North Carolina, Sheriff Quentin Miller said Buncombe County was especially hard hit.
Today, we can confirm 35 losses of life in Buncombe County. Devastation does not even begin to describe how we feel, but my teams will be continuing to help in recovery.
Footage from the unincorporated communities of Bat Cave and Mill Spring, North Carolina showed the extent of some of the damage, with homes, roads, and bridges decimated.
We're not leaving until the job is done.
U.S. President Joe Biden said he will soon travel to the South for a first-hand look at the devastation and pledged full support to the affected areas.
I've directed my team to provide every available resource as fast as possible to your communities to rescue, recover, and to begin rebuilding.
Vice President Kamala Harris cut short a campaign trip in Nevada on Monday to take part in briefings in Washington on the hurricane response. Meanwhile, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump visited Valdosta, Georgia, where he said he spoke to billionaire Elon Musk about getting Starlink internet access to affected areas.
We want to get Starlink hooked up because they have no communication whatsoever, and Elon will always come through, and we know that.
Later, the White House said dozens of Starlink satellite systems were in use in North Carolina, with over 100 more in transit to other areas, after Trump falsely claimed that the systems had not been deployed yet. Close to 2 million homes and businesses across the Southeast remained without power on Monday, according to PowerOutage.us.
The Smiths are one of many families in North Carolina that have been left homeless in the wake of Hurricane Helene. Flooding caused by the storm caused the creek behind their home to rise into a torrent, sending a boulder through a bedroom wall and demolishing 3 of the 4 walls of their house. Aaron, his wife, and their 2 sons were able to escape with a single suitcase, but they aren't sure when they'll be able to return to their tiny hamlet of Bat Cave.
There's nothing left. The firefighters are telling us it's going to be at least 6 months before we see our house again. And frankly, I doubt very much that it'll be that fast. So. Hey, dude. Amazing.
During the storm, the nearby Broad River rose to levels never seen before, washed away homes, and broke through the town's bridge. Climate scientists describe the devastation in the region as a 1,000-year event.
When it comes to where we're going to go from here, I guess anywhere but here. I don't see anything to go back to. We left our cars, of course. We have one suitcase, really, and so trying to figure out four people and a dog out of one suitcase. It's just surreal.
The death toll from the storm stood at more than 100 people on Monday evening and was expected to rise. Earlier in the day, helicopters tried to land in Bat Cave to evacuate people, but locals waved them away from a bridge that appeared ready to collapse. Across the U.S. Southeast, many people remained stranded without running water, and 1.8 million homes and businesses were without power, according to the website Power Outage US.
Britain will become the first G7 country to end coal-fired power production on Monday. It sees the closure of its last plant, Uniper's Ratcliffe-on-Soar in England's Midlands, ending more than 140 years of coal power in Britain. In 2015, Britain announced plans to close coal plants within the next decade as part of wider measures to reach its climate targets. Just under a third of the country's electricity came from coal at the time, but this had fallen to slightly over 1% last year. The drop in coal power has helped cut Britain's greenhouse gas emissions, which have more than halved since 1990. Britain has a target to reach net zero emissions by 2050 and plans to decarbonise the electricity sector by 2030. The move will need a rapid ramp-up in renewable power such as wind and solar. Emissions from energy make up around 3/4 of total greenhouse gas emissions. Scientists have said the use of fossil fuels must be cut to meet goals set under 2015's Paris Climate Agreement. The G7 major industrialised countries agreed at a meeting this year to end coal power in the first half of the next decade. But it did give some leeway to economies which are heavily coal-reliant, drawing criticism from green groups. Coal power still makes up more than a quarter of Germany's electricity and over 30% of Japan's power.
Production at Tata Electronics' iPhone plant in southern India will remain halted indefinitely after a weekend fire. That was according to Indian officials on Monday. A district officer told Reuters that the fire engines were still on site due to the risk of another fire, and the cause of the blaze is still unknown. A Saturday fire at the Tamil Nadu plant injured 10 and halted production, affecting Apple's iPhone supply chain as it looks to grow in India. The tech giant hasn't commented on the incident, while Tata said the cause of the fire is being investigated and safety protocols protected its employees. On Monday, rescue teams were still clearing debris, and inspections were difficult due to the heavy damage. The plant produces key iPhone components, while an adjoining building is expected to start assembling the phones by year-end. The condition of that building remained unclear. Tata Electronics is part of the $165 billion Tata Group and is a major Apple supplier in India, alongside Taiwan's Foxconn.
A strike has begun at 36 U.S. ports. Dock workers walked out at facilities on the East Coast and Gulf Coast after a midnight deadline for a deal passed.
The ILA is a force to be reckoned with.
The International Longshoremen's Association had been negotiating over pay with the United States Maritime Alliance group of employers. Now the strike could spell chaos for business, with the affected ports handling more than half of U.S. ocean trade.
ILA!
A widespread stoppage could upend transport and delay goods across a swath of industries. That's likely to mean higher shipping costs and ultimately higher prices for consumers. Analysts at J.P. Morgan say the daily cost to the economy could hit $5 billion. But one port worker in New Jersey said the union was right to take a stand.
The ILA is fighting for respect, appreciation, and fairness in a world in which corporations are dead set on replacing hardworking people with automation.
ILA leader Harold Daggett said that big ports and shipping lines like Maersk haven't done sufficient pay increases. But the Maritime Alliance says it had offered to increase wages by nearly 50%. Cornell University labor relations expert Harry Katz says the union has a strong hand to play.
Workers have a lot of bargaining power at the ports because they're essential. They work, most of them control the large cranes that lift large containers from trucks or railroad cars onto ships, and management cannot easily replace those workers.
The Biden administration had held talks with both sides, but to no avail. To the dismay of some business leaders, the White House has ruled out using federal powers to break a strike in the event of an impasse. Ahead of the stoppage, some retailers have rushed to secure stock early. They've brought in Halloween and Christmas merchandise ahead of schedule, often incurring extra costs for shipping and storage.
Bear meat, possum, and Donald Trump. These were some of the focal points at the annual West Virginia Roadkill Cook-Off on Saturday, with this year's event taking place just over a month before Election Day. For the past 33 years, the event has attracted adventurous eaters from near and far to the small Appalachian town of Marlinton.
Yeah, so the rules of the cook-off is you have to have something that's commonly found dead on the road in West Virginia.
Local banker Kendall Beveridge is making a special venison chili dish with fresh deer.
We killed one this morning coming in about 4 o'clock. Skinned that thing up. We have it on the Blackstone. We're cooking it up. We put it in with some beans. We called it our bumper beans, bustin' bumper beans.
Along with unusual eats, politics were a point of discussion this year ahead of the tightly contested election on November 5th. Many said they'd be backing the Republican presidential candidate.
I'll vote for Trump this year. I'd like to see the economy change.
Well, I support Trump because of the economy mostly and the border.
Immigration and the crime situation, inflation is on everybody's mind. And so, yeah, I cannot hardly wait to vote for Mr. Trump.
The support should come as no surprise. Trump won West Virginia by more than 2/3 the vote in 2020.
Personally, I'm kind of looking for the possum.
Even attendees from out of state, like these siblings from North Carolina, were leaning towards Trump, if a little reluctantly.
We're Republicans just because, party not necessarily supporting, not backing the candidate. We have kind of rocking a hard place as far as who we're choosing between. But, I'm Republican just because of the beliefs and the party. So that's who I'll be voting for, is probably Trump.
Organizers said the food served at the cook-off isn't actually roadkill, but dishes featuring animals you would find on the side of the road. Still, signs warn diners to eat at their own risk. Participating teams of cooks vied for a top prize of $1,500, won by a local educational nonprofit this year. Roadkill collisions are very common in West Virginia, given the state's many forested roads and large deer population. It even has a state law allowing drivers to take home and eat roadkill under certain conditions, such as informing the local law enforcement agency within 12 hours of hitting an animal.
U.S. stocks ended with modest gains on Monday, but enough for the Dow and S&P 500 to register record closing highs. The Dow ticked up marginally, while the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq each climbed about 0.4%. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, speaking at a conference in Nashville, said he sees 2 more rate cuts this year totaling 50 basis points if the economy evolves as expected.
Powell's speech that just came out was beautiful.
Robert Conzo is CEO and Managing Director of the Wealth Alliance.
Essentially what he said was, we have basically almost tamed inflation and got to our target. When you look at the PCE deflator that just came out, roughly 2.2, and the CPI, roughly 2.5. And now his mandate is switched, obviously, to labor. And he said, on top of that, labor is strong. Unemployment was in the mid-3s. Unemployment came up to 4.2, and prices came down. That's becoming more of a neutral rate, and he's in a neutral setting, and he's very, very positive about that.
Traders are now pricing in a 35% chance of a 50 basis point cut in November, down from more than 50% on Friday, according to CME's FedWatch tool. Investors will be watching to see if this week's key economic reports, including jobless claims and monthly non-farm payrolls, alter that picture. Stocks on the move included CVS Health, which rose nearly 2.5% after a report showed hedge fund Glenview Capital Management will meet top executives at the healthcare company to propose ways to improve operations. And shares of automakers slumped after Jeep maker Stellantis cut its 2024 profit forecast, with GM dropping 3.5% and Ford shedding 2%.
US watchdogs say foreign airlines may be using Boeing 737 jets with faulty parts that could pose a safety risk. The National Transportation Safety Board said Monday that more than 40 carriers could be using planes with faulty rudders. Last week, it issued urgent recommendations following analysis of a February incident on a United Airlines jet. That saw one of the pilot's rudder pedals become stuck while landing at New York's Newark Airport. No one was hurt in the incident, which was linked to a part in an optional landing system fitted to some planes. Now regulators say no US carriers still have aircraft with the faulty component, but at least 40 foreign ones may do. They didn't name the airlines involved, but the NTSB says there is a potential safety risk. It says 2 foreign operators suffered similar incidents in 2019. The watchdog criticised Boeing for failing to notify airlines about the part, which it says some may not even know is fitted. There was no comment Monday from the aerospace giant, though it said last week that it had told operators about the potential problem. It's all just the latest headache for the firm, which has endured a tumultuous year. That started with a mid-air blowout on one of its 737 MAX jets, which was traced to missing bolts on a critical fuselage part. The incident put renewed focus on the company's manufacturing quality and has crimped its ability to up output of the jets, its best-selling product. China's factories still aren't running at full tilt, and the service sector doesn't look any better. That was the gloomy picture painted by new data out Monday. The closely watched Purchasing Managers' Index for manufacturers did nudge up a little to 49.8 in September, but that still left it below the 50-point line that indicates falling activity. It's now been below that level for 5 straight months. The numbers come just days after Beijing launched its biggest stimulus package since the pandemic. That included interest rate cuts and help for mortgage borrowers. Further measures are expected to include special bonds to fund increased subsidies for consumer goods and business equipment. Those moves continue to boost stocks, with China's blue chip index up around 8% on Monday. That put the country's equity markets on track for their best month in nearly a decade. Even so, Monday's figures also showed the service sector slipping into contraction for the first time since December. Put it together, and the data may suggest even more economic support is needed if China is to hit its growth target of around 5% for the year. The construction sector was, however, one relative bright spot on Monday. Its PMI number hit 50.7, well above the key 50 mark. Last week, top leaders at China's Politburo meeting called for more efforts to boost the housing market. Reuters has reported that megacities Shanghai and Shenzhen will also take action, lifting all restrictions on home buying.
There ain't one.
After decades of on and off talks, DirecTV on Monday agreed to buy rival satellite TV company Dish from parent company EchoStar. The deal would create one of the nation's largest pay TV distributors with a total of 20 million subscribers. It comes as satellite TV companies are hemorrhaging market share to competitors such as Netflix and Amazon Prime, which have benefited from changing consumer habits and the rising popularity of streaming video platforms. DirecTV CEO Bill Morrow told Reuters the combined company plans to offer an improved viewer experience that would make it easier for subscribers to find their favorite shows, whether on traditional TV or via streaming, and manage their subscriptions from one place. As part of the deal, DirecTV will pay $1 to buy both Dish and EchoStar streaming service Sling TV, as well as assume nearly $9.8 billion of Dish's debt. The transaction should provide a crucial lifeline for EchoStar, which was co-founded by Chairman Charlie Ergen and is currently saddled with more than $20 billion in debt. Shares of EchoStar were down as much as 18% in Monday morning trading.
For disruption is significant. We've not had an event occur like this in our ports since 1977, and that lasted 12 days. We're deeply concerned about the impact that a strike could have on our supply chains, especially when it comes to critical goods like medical supplies and others. Do not have the level of anxiety that drives you out to get your groceries unnecessarily soon. We don't think there'll be a disruption to the food supply. But over time, if this goes on as long as the strike did in 1977, products that must come in on ships, like bananas, will be affected. But we still have plentiful food coming in from Canada, our own state, California, and Mexico. Those are the primary sources of food for the state of New York. So I just want everybody to not have that the concerns about the food supply as well.
Is conducting limited and targeted raids along Israel's northern border against the threat Hezbollah poses to civilians in northern Israel. If the state of Lebanon and the world can't push Hezbollah away from our border, we have no choice but to do it ourselves. I want to make it clear. Our war is with Hezbollah, not with the people of Lebanon. We do not want to harm Lebanese civilians, and we're taking measures to prevent that.